Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
This is the podcast where every week we review a classic pro wrestling event from a streaming service.
That classic pro wrestling event could be a major pay-per-view event. It could be a television special, a home video release with original matches, or in the case of this week's show, a major arena card from the territory days. And for this show, this was one of the more legendary, lost to the sands of time shows that surfaced a couple of years ago, Jeremy, and we were able to watch the entire show to review here on the podcast thanks to the randomizer.
Georgia Championship Wrestling presents The Last Battle of Atlanta, October 23rd, 1983. The main event of this show would be talked about, made famous by the photos that you would see in wrestling magazines in the 80s and 90s. Showing the enclosed cage, the pictures of the blood, the brutality in your mind. If you saw the pictures, you wanted to see this match. But for decades, the only ones who saw the match and the culmination of this feud were the fans that were in the Omni in Atlanta on that night.
And to be clear, this was an 18-month feud.
Absolutely.
That started in 1982, weaved its way all throughout 1982 into 1983, the summer of 83 into the fall. And yeah, this was the territory days where, you know, you go back now and you watch the weekly television, and in the case of Georgia Championship Wrestling, they build up to the big show coming up at the Omni, but you never actually see the show. The only people, as you said, that saw it were the people in the building. So the opportunity to finally get to see the show was rare.
Many consider this main event to be the predecessor to the NWA's War Games and to the Hell in a Cell match that debuted in the WWE almost 15 years later. At the time the match took place, videotape was expensive, and as part of cost-cutting measures, weekly episodes of the program were often taped over once they were shown on TV to make room for the show the following week. As reported by PW Insider, the event was filmed and ended up in the WCW tape library, but had never been transferred from its original master copy for use. After the WWE purchased the WCW's assets in 2001, the original reel went into the WWE library unmarked until it was finally discovered. And that's discovery is what we're going to watch today. It's available on the WWE Network right now. And this show opens up. It is a one hard camera presentation here for the Omni. And you just get no fancy anything, just right to the ring. We get introductions for Man of 1,000 Holds, Les Thornton versus Chief Joe Lightfoot.
Yes, and that the only thing we have introing this show is a static shot of the scoreboard in the Omni in Atlanta where it says Georgia Championship Wrestling scrolling across the scoreboard in that very 80s yellowish like dot matrix style lighting. And then it says be there in all caps. And then we are in fact there. And as you said, it is the Man of 1,000 Holds, not Dean Malenko, but Les Thornton here taking on Joe Lightfoot. The things I noted right away, first and foremost, as you said, hard camera. This showed it was a one camera shoot. And if you go back to the 1984 Boogie Jam show that we reviewed from Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, very similar in the sense that it was an arena show, not an actual televised show. And for that, they had a bunch of different camera shots that none of them were all that good outside of the ringside camera that was barely used. And the camera switches were very random, not well timed. So at the very least here, we had the hard cam. It made for a more coherent viewing experience. No announcers. But what we do have is we get almost 2 solid hours of my guy, referee Scrappy McGowan, who is a star in the stripes at Starrcade 86. He is here officiating most, if not all, of the matches. The other thing I noted right away is before this match even started, as the men were circling each other, is that this is one bouncy ring. This was not
Very much
the
so.
World Wrestling Federation ring of the 80s into the early 90s.
No, very bouncy. And we get a long, like a neck cravat from Lightfoot. Lightfoot transitions to a full Nelson, which Thornton counters by flipping him over. But Lightfoot bridges up, snap mirrors Thornton over. Nice little transition there. Back to the neck cravat, and that was some fun chain wrestling early.
Absolutely. Very good chain wrestling to start this match, and that really was the story for, you could say, the first 5 minutes of this match. In some ways, it was like those Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat matches that we've talked about. Obviously not as good, not as long.
Let's not get crazy. Wait.
Well, in one particular point where in those matches, you had the long sequences where Ricky Steamboat would work the side headlock takeover. Flair would counter, but he would end up back in that side headlock, 5-6 different ways. That's pretty much what happened here with the snap mirror into the cravat. I would imagine Chris Hero would watch this show and be very proud of the cravat application. A Steve Regal would enjoy this as well. But yeah, it kept going back no matter what was done to try to get out of the cravat. It was always counter, snap, mirror, cravat.
There are 3 old ladies sitting front row ringside,
yes,
and they are super into this match. I hope that they keep up this enthusiasm throughout the entire show. If they do, it's going to be the highlight for me. So we're going to keep an eye on these ladies in the front row.
I love this crowd in general. One of the things that I will point out, since we don't have actual announcing to mention on the show, I will point out the barbs or the color commentary that inadvertently makes its way on audio here. Is really, I think all we have is the ambient sound from this one camera.
Yep.
So you will hear vendors coming by, and you will also hear random Georgia Championship Wrestling fans in 1983 acting exactly as you would expect and hope. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, a lot of selling of programs. You hear programs.
Yes,
you get a lot of that.
I wanted one. I felt like I should get one. Again, watching the show with my headphones on, I do like these no announcer arena shows, these very basic shows as far as production, because it really does give you a sense again of what it would feel like, what it would have felt like to be in that building. And it's in some ways more immersive of an experience than having the full production.
Man of 1,000 holds cannot find one to get out of this single hold by Lightfoot. Finish comes as they go and exchange full Nelsons. Lightfoot drops down, tries to roll him up, but Thornton just packages him up there, drops down on top, and of Lightfoot, countering the roll up into a pin of his own, gets the 3 count. This was a nothing opener, just some good chain wrestling, but nothing too exciting.
I enjoyed it. For 1983, there was some good stuff. We had a sunset flip, a couple flying head scissors. We had, like you said, those long sequences with the cravat. But some good struggle within that hold that made it seem like it was actually something that you needed to work hard to get out of. That whole sequence probably went a little long when we get 6 minutes into the match and they're still doing that. A little much, but we had some good European forearms from Les Thornton. And then, we have Joe Lightfoot going for that wheelbarrow. And Les Thornton stuffs it for the pinning combination, and away we go. And I'll just say that I was desperately wanting more of this compared to what we got in the next match.
Yeah, so I immediately had to apologize to the guys in the opener because I was wrong. This was a nothing match. I'm sorry. This Pat Rose versus Bruno San Martino Jr.
Didn't we see Bruno San Martino Jr. on one of the early shows we did for this podcast? Because I thought we saw him once.
It's possible. I believe he's actually David San Martino, right? Like he's actually David San Martino, who will eventually wrestle briefly in WWF as well. San Martino Jr. looks a lot like his dad. He
looks like a lot like his dad. If you threw his dad in the dryer when he was damp and you left it on for too long, he came out shorter, but very similar barrel-chested physique, just shorter, not as hairy, lacking completely in charisma. Whereas Pat Rose Pat Rose, again, this is a shout out to all the Big Audio Nightmare listeners here. My other podcast, Focus on Japanese Professional Wrestling. This was so weird because Pat Rose is short. He's got a mustache. He has like an 80s haircut. He's nondescript, but his gear, he is wearing Genichiro Tenryu's gear. And it was so weird to me because like in the middle of this, I'm expecting like 52-year-old Tenryu to get grumpy and start punching him or hit him over the head with a beer bottle. But it's just Pat Rose here wearing that gear. My notes really on Bruno San Martino Jr. began and ended with the very short sentence, he is so short.
Yes, these two guys have the exact same short, stocky, muscular build. And
no, but I wouldn't even say muscular. They have a power lifter build rather than a bodybuilder.
Yes, not a bodybuilder. Build. No, it's like farm guy strength build.
Yes,
like...
it's for go, not for show. This is farm boy strength. This is functional, a functional physique here for both men.
San Martino puts it to good function by immediately showing off the power with a press slam early.
I did not expect that. It was not the smoothest press slam, but still I was impressed.
No, coming out hot. An elbow by Rose to the face of San Martino. And we get Rose, we get lots of like chopping, kicking, and punching. That's the majority of the middle of the match.
We also had a very awkward knee to the stomach by Pat Rose halfway through the match before the headlock punches, which were a staple of pro wrestling back then, where you put the guy in a side headlock and then just punch him in the face. We then had Bruno getting body slammed by Pat Rose, but then Bruno Jr. does the big, like, super strong guy power kick out where you throw the guy off, and it just, I don't know, it just looked funny to me. We then have Pat Rose with a very unconvincing chokehold, where he just kind of rests his hands on the neck of Bruno San Martino Jr., but it does not appear as though he's all that concerned with doing anything. At this point, Bruno fights out of the corner, hits a big punch, and my notes just say this is boring.
It very much so. The finish comes with Rose off the ropes. San Martino catches him, hits a power slam, gets a 3 count. That's it. It felt a little out of nowhere. Your winner's Bruno San Martino Jr. And again, I apologize for calling the opener a nothing. I was wrong. This was a nothing.
This was the definition of a nothing match. My notes here say Bruno was not very good. At least the match was short, like he was.
This next match is announced as mask versus mask. And one of the participants does not have a mask on. So I'm already a little confused.
I recognized what was going on pretty quickly, but I knew you had less familiarity with these men than I did, most likely.
Yes.
So
I didn't know what was going on until I saw Mr. Wrestling on the outside of the ring. The original Mr. Wrestling is sitting outside the ring. He's been instructed not to wrestle by his doctor, according to the ring announcers.
He cannot wrestle without his doctor's approval. The ring announcer on this show was very helpful. He was more verbose and chatty than most ring announcers you would have on a pro wrestling show. But when you have no announcers and you're not watching the weekly TV to this, as is the mandate for this randomly generated podcast, where we don't watch weekly TV leading up to these shows that get dropped in our laps by the randomizer, this ring announcer was very helpful. He says that Mr. Wrestling cannot wrestle without his doctor's approval, and then tells us that Bob Roop will be substituting for Mr. Wrestling. But if Bob Roop loses, the original Mr. Wrestling will have to unmask, and if Mr. Wrestling 2 loses, he will obviously have to lose his mask. Bob Roop, who was around the block quite a few times in a lot of different territories around this time, Bob Roop was very good at what he did. He was short, he was squat, and he was freaking huge in his All-American singlet here.
So as soon as the ring announcer makes this introduction saying that Mr. Wrestling will not be cleared by his doctor and will not be part of this match, people are irate. They are very angry about this, including my favorite old ladies in the front row. They were very angry, and Mr. Wrestling is sitting right in front of them, so they had a lot to say to him. I loved that.
The least surprising thing on this show is that those three old ladies were huge Mr. Wrestling #2 fans.
They were,
because it just screams the demographic that would appeal here. Also, we had a few things. First, we had a jump cut before the bell rang, so it makes me wonder how long this stalling went. Then I also noted that Bob Roop is like Tetsuya Naito here in terms of taking his time adjusting his gear, adjusting his knee pads before he's ready to wrestle. I feel like I'm watching Naito in New Japan get in the ring and slowly undo his cuffs and then take his dress shirt off and then take his dress pants off before he reveals his regular gear and we get going.
Speaking of fashion. Speaking of fashion, let me jump in here because let's take
Wrestling too.
Yeah, let's take a minute to pop into the fashion corner here as we've got business casual Mr. Wrestling on the outside. He's in a button-up short sleeve shirt, a collared shirt,
Mr. Wrestling,
long pants outside the ring.
Mr. Wrestling 1 appears as though he is going to sell you insurance or he is going to sell you a nice used car, not a lemon. He's not going to swindle you. Although maybe with him being a heel, maybe he will, but I have a good feeling that it'll be okay. Whereas Mr. Wrestling #2, if you have never seen him before, again, a legend in the professional wrestling business, but I would make the argument that as far as legendary superstars, big time draws, legitimate stars in the business, few men had worse gear than him. He's not in bad shape, but he's not in great shape. He's a professional wrestler.
He's very much past his prime at this point.
Well, and he would get to be more past his prime if you'd watch him later. But he's a major star here. The crowd loves him, but his gear was, and always will be just tighty whities, white briefs with a hint of black trim on the top. And I feel as though while there were no malfunctions of said wardrobe, I feel as though I saw more of Mr. Wrestling 2 than I was hoping to coming into this match.
So Mr. Wrestling 2 takes down Roop with a trip, cocks his fist to throw a punch. Roop flinches, rolls under the bottom rope. The crowd is on fire already for this match.
Yes, this is by far of the things that we've watched so far on this show, on this last Battle of Atlanta's show. The biggest crowd heat, not surprising, legitimate star here, big stakes. Mr. Wrestling 2 is one of those guys, again, like a product of this time period where he's not great, but there's something about what he does and the way he moves. And again, the long period of familiarity that the fans have with him, and they love him, they love everything about him. It's where you don't feel like you should be intrigued or you should enjoy it, but there's something enjoyable watching him wrestle.
Absolutely. And Roop picks up Wrestling 2, picks him up, puts him on the top turnbuckle, seated, but Wrestling 2 catches him with a knee to the face.
That was awesome. That was Mr. Wrestling 2, his thing was the knee lift. That was the big deal. You still hear Jim Ross in 2020 talk about the Mr. Wrestling 2 knee lift. And this was it was short and violent. Just like it was at the absolute last second that he lifted the knee up. It was great.
2 count. Roop gets his foot on the rope. So Roop's got his foot on the bottom rope to break up the pin. And so Wrestling 2 gets up and immediately jumps onto the leg that he had sitting on the bottom rope. More guys should totally do that. That's a move I'd like to see come back nowadays. That was really neat.
Absolutely, yeah. Take advantage of the fact that the guy it put his leg in a vulnerable position to get out of this pinfall attempt and just, prop yourself, put yourself out the first rope and do that bombs away right onto the knee and get yourself a body part to start working over.
Roop knocked outside. He goes by Mr. Wrestling and takes his crutch. Mr. Wrestling 2 tries to go after Roop, but the ref is holding him back. Wrestling 2 pushes the ref out of the way so he doesn't see as Roop nails Wrestling 2 with the crutch. Everyone, including the best old ladies in the world, are yelling at the ref, pointing to Mr. Wrestling on the outside, telling the ref what happened. The ref stops to ask Roop about it, and Roop shows how he used a forearm to the stomach.
Yes.
This was great stuff. I loved it.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was tremendous, and it was also, you see a lot of ref bumps in modern pro wrestling, ref distractions, and a lot of times they They don't look good. They look very half-hearted. The referee just ends up looking like an idiot. Here, like you had everything that would normally happen, but the ref didn't end up looking like an idiot because of it. Like he was trying to hold back two legitimately shoved him out of the way. And in that split second where the ref couldn't see, as two rushes towards Roop gets him with the crutch, Scrappy, the referee, looks back, but it happened so quickly that it's not as if you're thinking, oh God, this guy's an idiot. I can't believe he didn't see it. It was completely understandable. And then, as you said, Roop was just a great classic heel doing the it's just a forearm. It's just a forearm. It was good stuff.
Roop goes for the mask of 2, and he will have none of that. Instantly fires back with a ton of right hands. Roop cuts him off with a clothesline. Swinging neckbreaker by Roop. Roop then puts Wrestling 2 upside down in the Tree of Woe. Again goes for the mask. Again 2 fights back. Wrestling 2 is confident as Roop is begging off. He's almost strutting around the ring.
Oh, yes. He had a particular strut when he would be doing his big babyface fire comebacks like this. And so one thing you can say about Mr. Wrestling number 2 is that he was great coming back, showing the fire.
Oh, yeah.
He was, the crowd was 100% with him. He was, again, your classic babyface of this time period. And Bob Roop was just your great, journeyman, upper mid-card journeyman sort of heel here. There are a few things coming out of this as we get towards the finish here. I love when 2 was in the midst of his comeback as the crowd is yelling 2 with every move he does. I feel like it's almost like a modern crowd where they do 1, 2, for the count. Here, everyone's just yelling 2 every time he hits a move. But then Bob Roop cuts him off with a hip attack, a flying hip attack.
I literally wrote down, was that a knee or a flying hip attack?
Oh, it was Shiro Koshinaka. We're totally here. Flying hip attack. And then the finish. I loved this. We had Bob Roop picking up Mr. Wrestling number 2, going for a shoulder breaker, not the Scott Norton style, but the over the shoulder, basically like a running power slam type position, but goes for the shoulder breaker. But Mr. Wrestling 2, we have not, like, it doesn't go on for 10 minutes, but this long-ish struggle for him to get out of this. But it's just the coolest and most realistic way possible for someone to get out of this. And it just, again, it looks like a struggle. It looks like he's really fighting and get out of this dangerous move. He finally gets out of it.
Well, before he gets out of it, the way he blocked the shoulder breaker was he was using his hands to push the knee away.
Yes.
And so he did this repeatedly as he was trying to push, he was trying to bring him down shoulder first across the knee. He was using his own hands to push the knee away to continue that struggle. That was excellent.
It's almost like something you would see in a horror movie or something where someone's about to stab someone with a weapon and you stop it just before it reaches you and there's a struggle. It was basically that, but Bob Roop's knee was the weapon in this case. And then, Mr. Wrestling 2 finally gets out of it, rolls him up, and gets the victory.
Yeah, your winner's Mr. Wrestling 2.
And the crowd loves it.
You can tell everyone's excited because people were jumping up and down and slightly blocking the one hard cam that is doing this. This is the first time we've seen the camera obstructed by fans jumping up and down with joy because Mr. Wrestling 2 was a victor. Now, we can see Wrestling 1 quickly leave the ringside area. The ref stops him from going to the back, telling him to get back there. He's got to unmask. Wrestling 2 at this point reaches down, pulls the mask off of Mr. Wrestling 1. It's hard to see as people are now bumping into the camera. But Mr. Wrestling uses his shirt to hide his face. Now
he does. But then at this point, Mr. Wrestling 1, the original Mr. Wrestling, is starting to exit stage right. We see, again, this is back in the territory days where there were legit cops guarding the entranceway because you did not know what fans were going to do. The cops were not paying close enough attention, though, because you clearly see, and I rewound this several times.
So did I.
You clearly see a fan in the front row come running toward Mr. Wrestling, and the fan pulls the shirt off of Mr. Wrestling's head.
Yes.
So he unmasks him a second time.
A fan in front of a police officer reaches over and rips the shirt off his head. This was absolutely nuts. I rewinded it a couple times too. No, not at all.
This was legit. This is a legit fan, because then you see everybody, we start to fade to black at this point, but you see the policemen and people realizing, oh God, what just happened? This was, I guess they tried to not give the fans what they want by putting that shirt over Mr. Wrestling's face. And this fan was determined to make sure the stipulation was going to pay off, whether he was not going to see the rest of the show or not. The rest of the fans were going to get to see Mr. Wrestling here.
Fun fact time. Mr. Wrestling 1 and 2 teamed together for the last time on August 14th, 1983. So this is October of the same year, 1983. So Wrestling 1 and 2 were a tag team for the final time earlier this year in August of 83. Tim Woods was the original Mr. Wrestling 1. He'd largely retired in 83, but Ole Anderson, as Booker, in charge of the territory, was trying to get the Road Warriors over and came up with the idea to put the area's most legendary tag team, even though past their primes, for one last match. The Road Warriors won quickly, and it is believed that that was Mr. Wrestling's last match. A fake Mr. Wrestling, Jesse Barr, was brought in for Mr. Wrestling 2 to beat in this mask match in October. So that was a fake Mr. Wrestling.
Well, that explains then why they did the unmasking, but were trying to hide it.
NWA National Heavyweight Title Match. So this was the main title for the NWA Georgia territory. It was around from 1980 until 1986, when the National Heavyweight title was unified with the NWA's United States Championship. Nikita Koloff was the one to actually unify these titles in 86. The champion here is Brett Wayne versus the challenger, a young and up-and-comer, Jake the Snake Roberts.
I found it interesting and really smart here that when they did the ring introductions for Jake, he was billed as being from Sweetwater, Louisiana, instead of Stone Mountain, Georgia, which I'm assuming is so that Jake the Snake Roberts, the young, dastardly heel, would not get the hometown cheers of the Atlanta fans.
No, Brett Wayne got plenty of the hometown cheers. And a fun fact, Brett Wayne would also wrestle under the name Brett Sawyer. That's right. Yeah. He's the legit brother of Buzz Sawyer, who we will see in the main event of this show later.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Brett Wayne / Brett Sawyer had quite a run in the Portland territory.
Jake is so much taller than Wayne here. It looks completely absurd.
Well, and Jake's gear, too. Jake the Snake, he basically is wearing like a red version of like the Great Muta or Great Kabuki pants, which is actually a really cool look for him.
Yeah, the red karate pants.
Yes. It's also Brett Wayne has the biggest tape job I've ever seen on a wrestler's leg in my life. His leg from like ankle to upper thigh is just entombed in athletic tape.
Yeah, it's a heavily bandaged left knee here for Wayne. It's noticeable. You see it right away, and it'll play a factor in the match, of course.
I also love how at the beginning of the match, before the bell even rings, Jake points at the knee of Brett Wayne and has the referee inspect it closely, because Jake, the dastardly heel, is worried that the babyface, Brett Wayne, is hiding something in his leg tape.
All Brett Wayne early. He is very popular. Jake gets the upper hand using a test of strength. Jake jumps off the bottom rope to get the advantage in the test of strength. I'd never seen that done before.
Yeah, this is awesome. They back into the corner in the test of strength, and then Jake goes up the ropes and then jumps off to get the advantage. Very cool, very different. Also, other very cool thing about Jake Roberts here, super unique, and this almost reminds me of what Sabu would do, where like the match starts and Jake immediately goes for this wild single leg dive.
Yes.
Like this wild leg takedown. He also early on in the match, he goes out to the floor, but and this probably sounds a little too on the nose given his nickname, but the only way I can describe it is he slithers out to the floor. Like there's an Irish whip, a leapfrog. Brett Wayne catches him with a body slam and a drop kick. And then Jake is like in the middle of the ring and he's on his stomach and he just slithers backward under the bottom rope to the floor. So awesome.
It's time to check in with my favorite ladies in the front row. They are, in fact, firmly behind Brett Wayne here. So, Wayne puts Jake in a headlock, and Jake hits him with a forearm right in the bad leg while he's in the headlock.
Yes, that like a low chopping like clothesline or forearm to the leg. Very cool.
Which Jake immediately demonstrates for the ref how it was a forearm, totally legal. Jake does the same thing again. Wayne goes to work on Jake's arm. Jake's able to get to the ropes for a rope break. He slides underneath the bottom rope to the outside. This is when Brett Wayne steps partially through the ropes. His bad knee is on the rope as he's reaching through, grabbing Roberts by the hair. Jake with a quick punch. Wayne falls backward. His knee, the bad knee, it gets caught up in the ropes. Jake quickly back in and goes to work on the bad leg. This was such a cool setup for Jake to get the advantage to work over the leg.
Absolutely. Very different, very simple, but unique and logical, which I think is one of the things you can say about a lot of the stuff on this show. Maybe not the most viscerally exciting action, but a lot of cool little things that if you're paying attention, you find yourself thinking, why don't guys do this now? Or why don't we see this more often? I also want to check in with my favorite fans, the people very close to the camera. At one point, we have Brett Wayne hit a knee drop to the arm, and the loud guy near the camera yells, "Do it again, do it again, do it again. Love it, love it, love it." And I feel as though I am in Atlanta, Georgia on an October night in 1983.
Jake continues to work the leg over, including a spot where Jake is holding the bad leg. Wayne does a sit-up and punches Jake, but Jake just shakes his head as there is not enough mustard behind that punch. And every time Wayne tries to fight back, he just crumbles down because of that injured knee.
Yeah, Wayne was very good here selling the knee. You had two guys who were just great in their roles in this match. Ring announcer check-in. He clearly forgot to tell us that 10 minutes had gone by because we got an 11 minutes have gone by in the match announcement, which we didn't have a 10, we didn't have a 12. So I was amused by that.
Brett Wayne's on the outside. The ref pushes Jake away to like the other side of the ring as he begins his count. Jake takes a back bump to then roll out of the ring.
Yes.
Pretty wacky. Jake drops Wayne throat first across the barricade outside. And then I guess
before that, they did this spot twice. This was around the 15-minute mark. Jake goes out to the floor. He slams Brett Wayne's head off the timekeeper table, rolls back into the ring. Scrappy's checking on Wayne. And then, as you said, Jake rolls and slithers his way back to the floor, hot shots him on the guardrail. And then he goes up to the top rope as he goes back in the ring, taunts the fans in one corner, goes to the other corner, and I feel as though we're watching Slamboree 95 again with the Great Muta.
Yeah.
he acts like he might dive to the floor, and that's I write down Jake is almost Muta-like here, and it's it's one of probably the most belabored points I make on this podcast. But when we talk about other guys like Muta and Wyndham and Arn Anderson, Jake is another example of that guy that has that super completely unique style of moving around the ring that to me is so much more valuable as a wrestler than what moves you're actually doing.
Yeah, 6 years before we'd see the Great Muta in this country.
Yes.
And so Wayne comes up. He's bleeding from the forehead.
Yeah, most likely storyline-wise from that being slammed headfirst into the table.
Back in the ring, Jake with a belly-to-back suplex and a lazy, cocky cover only can get a 2 count. Mr. Wrestling 2 comes out to ringside as a bloody Brett Wayne starts to fight back, but Wayne misses a drop kick as Jake held onto the top rope. Jake quickly pounces again, dropping knees to the injured knee of Wayne again. Jake
Another
with a
chop block.
Chop block, yep. And then
More
it looks like
stomps and knees to the knee. Just unrelenting here from Jake Roberts.
And it looks like we got Buzz Sawyer and Ole Anderson also at ringside with Mr. Wrestling 2. Ole is talking to Wayne as he rolls around in pain on the mat. Ole's yelling, trying to fire him up.
At this point, we're 20 minutes into this match, according to the announcements. And yet, Brett Wayne is a bloody mess. He's writhing in pain. A very, very a babyface you can empathize with greatly at this point.
Jake is repeatedly dropping elbows across the knee as it's killing Ole and Mr. Wrestling
losing
2.
The idea of Ole Anderson having empathy for another human being it took my brain a little bit of a reset to believe that, but it was so well executed here.
They're teasing they might be close to throwing in the towel. And then, Ole grabs the towel from Wrestling 2, throws it in the ring, then jumps onto Brett Wayne to protect him and protect his injured knee from Roberts, almost like jumping on the grenade here. The last few minutes here were awesome, just incredible. The Jake Roberts intense heelish destruction of the last few minutes here was so awesome, just unbelievable for him being so young in his career. Absolutely, it was phenomenal.
It was everything that you would go on to see Jake Roberts do later in his career, but it was done so well here, as you said, at such a young age, such an early time in his career. And his ability to communicate his intentions and draw that level of hatred, but not in like a cartoonish way.
No.
Just through what he's doing in the ring. No mic work. I'm watching this. I know this is 1983. I'm watching single camera. There are no announcers. And I am getting drawn in here. As someone who's watched wrestling for 35, 36 years as a 39-year-old man, I'm watching this and I'm in my head. I'm like, somebody help Brett Wayne. This is too much.
No, the story was absolutely captivating. It was a riveting story that the match told. And Jake the Snake Roberts wins the match, but not the title because you can only win by pin or submission. This is a terrible finish.
It's a terrible rule. The finish was great.
The finish is great. The rule is terrible.
It's a terrible loophole because if you apply logic to it, I can tell you what I'm doing. Every single time I'm in a championship match, I'm having a second who will throw in the towel just before I'm going to lose. I will never win a match, but I will never lose the championship.
Yes, this was completely nuts. Jake's taunting Ole in Wrestling 2 to hit him. Jake basically beat him so badly that others quit for him. They quit on his behalf. And Jake is absolutely right after this match that he should be the champ here.
We had a great stare down as well. Just great. When I say stare down, what made it so great was that it was so understated. We see Jake and Buzz Sawyer kind of cross paths outside of the ring as Jake is leaving, and they just kind of look at each other. But no, like those two guys, what we just saw from Jake the Snake Roberts and the insanity in human form that is Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer, there's so much tension as you see it. And you're just thinking what the possibilities could be with those two guys. We see a half dozen or so cops at ringside getting ready to escort Jake Roberts to the back. And that was awesome.
Yeah, Jake was so great in everything he did in this match. I literally had to stop the show at this point and walk away here and I needed a break because I loved that match and I was so angry at the finish I was so angry at the decision. I'm like, all right, I need to take a break here. When I resumed the show, we're back in the ring. No introductions here. We have Ronnie Garvin versus the great Kabuki with his manager, of course, the great Gary Hart.
Friends of the show, favorites of the podcast, Gary Hart in particular, who we've seen all over this podcast, world class, here at Georgia Championship Wrestling, like everywhere. He was with Kabuki. He was great always. It's weird, though. This starts, and immediately Gary Hart just gets waylaid by the hands of and Ronnie Garvin.
Well, Gary Hart, first of all, he's in a suit, and he's standing in front of Garvin.
They've got in that purple wrestling gear.
Not his wrestling gear, no. He's in a suit, standing in front of Garvin. Hart has his hands behind his back, almost daring him to punch him.
Yeah.
Garvin gives him the finger wag to Hart's face, and Hart gives the finger wag back to Garvin's face. Then Hart turns his back to Garvin. He starts to walk away. That's when Ronnie Garvin grabs his shoulder. Hart turns around, and he gets punched out by Garvin. Now that's where he gets waylaid. Kabuki... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say Kabuki then immediately blows the mist into the air, and we're ready to actually start the match now.
Can we talk about Ronnie Garvin, who is called at this point the one-man gang? Ronnie Garvin? This guy, if you've seen Ron Garvin, even in like 1987, this is just a couple years earlier, he is a Greek god of a human being here.
Yep.
He looks like he's something straight out of like a magazine in the 50s. He is tan, he has blonde hair, he is just as you said, absolutely jacked. And it was one of those deals where like I knew it was Ronnie Garvin, that's what it said on the match listing, but it took me a while to fully accept that this was in fact Ron Garvin. Like he would age 25 years in the next 3 or 4 years. It is, I would say, honestly, of any of the guys that we've watched, in multiple shows on this podcast with a relatively short number of years between their appearances, it's the biggest physical transformation I've ever seen.
Yeah, just that he didn't look anything like this when we what was that, Bash 86? He looked completely different 3 years later from this match. Yeah, it's all Kabuki early, as we've got a lot of kicks, chops, a long nerve hold.
Well, how about those weird very early on, the first time he gets the nerve hold on, those weird like running shoulder block things that Garvin does that kind of send Kabuki spinning through the air. I don't know exactly what this was. I don't know if it was what they intended to do. It was weird. It was one of those things where I watched it. I didn't quite know who hurt who.
Yeah.
But it was notable.
Kabuki goes to the middle rope, like the turnbuckle, and then walks the rope and leaps off into the nerve hold again.
Yes, I cackled. We had multiple times in this match. We had a second rope walk into a diving nerve hold.
Yes.
Like, this is something that it was not done ironically here, but this is something that I would imagine in modern times, like on an indie show, you would have somebody do this for like an irony pop.
Yes.
On a show. This was something else.
Yeah, when we say nerve hold, we're talking about he's pinching the shoulder, like the trapezius muscle here. And Gary Hart,
with both hands, he walks the ropes, puts both of his arms high into the air, and then leaps off with reckless abandon into a perfectly applied nerve hold. It's honestly one of my favorite things that I've seen in all the shows we've reviewed on this podcast. It made me far happier than it probably should have.
Gary Hart distracts the referee, allowing Kabuki to go in and bite the neck of Garvin. This bite goes on for like 20 seconds. It was a long time.
Yeah, I just imagine how much more vicious it would have been if he jumped off the second rope first.
Garvin's selling his neck up to his feet. Kabuki hits a great spinning kick to the back of Garvin's head. Garvin starts fighting back with punches, then payback as he bites the forehead of Kabuki. Garvin does the two-finger eye poke twice, then a thumb to the throat by Garvin. This guy's had enough.
This was Ronnie Garvin was it was kind of like the Hulk Hogan school of being a babyface but doing every heel move in the book. That's what I was thinking here. We also have you went past the second attempt, the second time for the flying rope walk nerve hold, and there's a lot going on here. Ronnie Garvin is spasming and convulsing. The ref checks on him, and as you said, then Kabuki starts biting him, and the referee is completely not paying attention to this at all. At this point, we get the announcement, which apparently this is for a championship, and we get the announcement that there are 2 minutes remaining for the title, 12 minutes remaining in the match.
Okay, because I had no idea what was happening here because Garvin's ramming Kabuki's head into the buckle a few times, and the announcer says the time limit portion has expired, and now the match will continue. And I'm like,
the title portion. I'm pretty sure this is for a championship of some sort.
I was confused.
The stipulation here appeared to be that it was a 20-minute time limit. The first 10 minutes, whatever championship this was, that was on the line. And then if the match went beyond that, the title is no longer on the line, but I guess you could still go to the pay window if you won.
All Ronnie Garvin after this. Garvin gives Kabuki what looked to be a knee right into the ass, but not an atomic drop.
No, yeah, this was just a straight knee to the asshole. This was, excuse my language on this family-friendly podcast, but that is the only way to describe this. This was unique. This was definitely something a little bit different.
Kabuki goes for a neck breaker, but Garvin holds onto the rope. Garvin pulls Kabuki to the corner.
Well, how about before he goes for this? So he hits this great reverse neck breaker. Before that, he hits a chop and a spin kick. But between that sequence and said knee to the rear end, right, Kabuki starts spinning around wildly for some reason. And it's great Kabuki, so it's awesome, but it's just so weird. His arms are flailing in the air, and he's just spinning around the ring.
Garvin's got Kabuki to the corner. Kabuki's lying under the bottom rope here with the ring post between his legs, allowing Garvin on the outside to pull him into the post, hitting him low twice. Garvin comes in the ring, hits the Garvin stomp, which is where he stomps on each arm, each leg, going around the whole body until finishing by stomping on the man's face.
This is where I finally fully accepted that this was in fact Ronnie Garvin.
A couple elbow drops, and Garvin goes for the cover. And this is where Gary Hart has a lighter lit in his hand.
He attempts to light Ronnie Garvin's face on fire.
He tries to burn his ear, tries to light his hair on fire. I'm like, oh, I was screaming, oh my God. Like
This is what I love about 80s NWA territory wrestling, stuff like this. Gary Hart is just great. And yeah, he tried to light the man's face on fire, and I loved it. I'm sorry.
Absolutely insane. Crazy. Garvin on the outside immediately attacks Hart, and the place
beats the hell out of him.
The place is loving every second of this beating. Garvin would punch him. Hart would miss. Garvin would punch him again. Hart would miss again. I loved Gary. We are huge Gary Hart fans on this podcast, and this should go on the highlight reel. I loved him taking this beating.
Well, at this point, then we have the great Kabuki reach over or through the ropes and rake Ronnie Garvin's eyes. And then my favorite part of this whole sequence is once that happens, Gary Hart, who's still, he's dazed, but he immediately rakes Garvin's eyes too. But then at this point, things get frustrating because the guy in front of the cameraman stands up. We can't see what happens. Something happens, and then the great Kabuki pins Ronnie Garvin.
So, yeah, like you said, this dude stands up directly in front of the camera. And
he's not short, which is frustrating.
All we see is the back of this guy's head. I felt like being the short guy at a concert. That's exactly.
I felt like being a little kid when I first started going to wrestling shows, and this exact thing would happen.
Yes. So something happened in the ring. We don't see any of it. Kabuki goes for the cover and gets the win. So the great Kabuki's your winner. We don't know what happened. And then we get this match. Okay.
So I will preface this. We did a show talking about this was the Coliseum home videotape, right? Where the Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom, wrestled the Hart Foundation.
Yep. WrestleFest 91.
There you go. WrestleFest 91, hosted by
Man of Leisure,
Savage,
Macho
Man of
Randy
Leisure,
Savage.
Randy Savage from Tranquility Base. And the story of that match, as we talked about on this podcast, which you can go back and listen to at any time at wrestlingatrandom.com, was that it was a 50-50 match between the Hart Foundation and the Road Warriors. And we commented at the time on how strange it was to see the Road Warriors, who usually just go in and just no sell and dominate, beat the hell out of their opponents, get in, get out. Crowd goes crazy. You have a good time and it's over. There, it was just like a regular tag team match. Keep that in mind as we move to this match in 1983 with a very young, terrifyingly huge Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors.
Yeah, they looked phenomenal and terrifying. The Road Warriors were your NWA National Tag Team Champions, and they were defending against the challengers Jimmy Valiant and Pez Whatley. Now, we've seen, I think Jimmy Valiant might hold the record for most matches that reviewed by the Wrestling at Random podcast at this point.
He's in the program, that's for sure. There may Greg the Hammer Valentine might be in that mix as well.
Oh, screw you, randomizer. Yeah, that's right.
The human intermission as he was called by Dave Meltzer at one point, and I know you've adopted that nickname for him with much gusto. But yes, we have seen a lot of the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant here on a lot of these old school shows. He was in the main event of the Boogie Jam 1984 show that we reviewed
after Flair Steamboat.
After a Flair Steamboat 60-minute draw, Jimmy Valiant, Boogie Woogie Man, which again, I mean, he is massively over. He's the ultimate example of a guy who can do nothing, but is just red hot over every time you see him. Teaming with not Shasta, but Pez Whatley here. A slightly different look for the man who would go on to be known as the Pistol Pez Whatley. And the Boogie Woogie Man comes out with Pez Whatley, gets on the microphone. The only mic work we have this entire show.
Whoa, before he gets the microphone, the first thing he does when he comes out is he gives a big kiss to one of my favorite old ladies in the front row. She gets a big kiss from the Boogie Woogie Man. And then,
as it should happen.
and while these shenanigans are happening at ringside with Jimmy Valiant, while he goes over to cut a promo on the house mic, the Road Warriors are pacing inside the ring, and you could tell they're waiting. Animals. They are waiting to kill these guys, and I am so excited to watch these guys get destroyed by the Road Warriors. Valiant cuts a promo over the house mic, and it is hard to hear due to Valiant being incomprehensible, as well as the bad audio of the house mic. So I didn't pick up a lot, but I did hear him say,
I have the exact quote for you.
Please do.
Because as someone who grew up
you speak
on
fluent
these territories and saw a lot of Jimmy Valiant as a child, I can tell you exactly what he says. He calls the Road Warriors bald-headed geeks.
Yep.
He then says, Boogie and Whatley and all my brothers and sisters in Atlanta are going to kick some booties tonight.
And Whatley and Valiant get in the ring, and
then they live up to Jimmy Valiant's promise.
They beat up the Road Warriors. Seriously, they beat him up. Whatley headbutts Hawk, who goes flying out of the ring. This was crazy.
This was the weirdest match I have seen in my entire life. Who knows? Maybe that's hyperbole, but I can say without a doubt, this is the weirdest match.
You couldn't have expected this.
No, this is the weirdest match that we have reviewed on this podcast, and we've reviewed some strange matches. But this is the Road Warriors in 1983, looking like they could kill everyone in the building at once. They're in the ring with Pez Whatley and Jimmy Valiant. And this entire match, the entire match is them bumping for Jimmy Valiant and Pez Whatley, literally not getting a single bit of offense in this entire match.
I couldn't believe this. There was this flurry of offense. When I thought they were going to be killed was crazy. The good guys are dancing about it. They're giving each other a butt bump in the ring.
Yes, we've got a strut, a butt bump. We've got sleeper holds. We've got Road Warriors trying to make saves, but Pistol Pez cutting them off.
They double slingshot the Road Warriors back into the ring.
Yes, they bring them both back in the ring the hard way. Imagine that visual of Pez Whatley and Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant bringing the Road Warriors back in the ring the hard way. The classic 80s wrestling physics thing of pulling the rope back, and that causes 300-pound men to go flying through the air in a somersaulting fashion.
This beating of the Road Warriors was so non-strenuous to Valiant that he still had his sunglasses and bandana on at this point.
This was
Pez Watley.
Sorry, go ahead.
Pez Watley, he goes toe-to-toe with Hawk, and then he starts strutting around in celebration, which he should, because he was going toe-to-toe with Hawk. Valiant almost puts Animal out with a sleeper. The ref's checking his arm, but it doesn't drop the third time. Animal shoves the ref, who collides with Hawk and goes down. All 4 men are in. Valiant still has a sleeper hold on Animal, and Animal's out.
Yeah.
Watley has a 10 punch on Hawk going in the corner. The ref is still down. Valiant crotches Animal against the ring post. And then I'm like, what happened? Did some fan hit the ring? I couldn't tell because the camera was focused on the outside of the ring, but it's some wrestler in to check on the ref.
It's
Bruno
Jr.
San Martino Jr. Oh, I see. Okay.
He's not just there to check on the ref. He says he'll be the ref, but he immediately gets thrown out by the Road Warriors, which I cackled. I enjoyed that. Yes. There's also at this point a bright, like when I say bright, I mean Technicolor bright orange chair in the ring that the Boogie Woogie Man got at some point during this this beatdown of the Road Warriors.
He hits Hawk with the chair right to the gut. He falls outside. That's where San Martino starts his count on the Road Warriors. He's counting him out of the ring. The crowd's counting along like this matters. Hawk pulls him out to the floor, like you mentioned, stopping this nonsense altogether. San Martino goes head first into the ring post, and now the Warriors are in, and I'm like, here we go. But no, they were in to get beat up again.
Yes. I could not believe what I was watching. Yeah, they come back in to go after this babyface team, and then they just get the hell beat out of them again. At this point, Scrappy McGowan rules that the faces, that Boogie Woogie Man and Pez have won by disqualification. The Road Warriors come in and get beat up and knocked out of the ring again.
They keep getting beat up. The Road Warriors keep getting beat up.
This is Hawk and Animal, and they're just like, I'm watching this, and I just cannot fathom that they were booked this way in this match.
I thought this would be a total squash, and
it was.
But I did not think it would be the Road Warriors getting destroyed. Unbelievable. What did I just see? Holy cow.
I still have a hard time believing that I saw it, but I also don't think I can ever get myself to go back and watch it. No. That said, the crowd absolutely loved this. They came unglued. My favorite part of this whole thing was then at the end, there's the bright orange chair is still in the ring sitting up. Boogie Woogie, Jimmy Valiant, sits down in the chair, and San Martino sits on one leg, Pez sits on the other leg, and it's like Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant is Santa Claus in Atlanta in October. Professional wrestling, everybody. You can't get this anywhere else.
And a match that nobody could get anywhere else until now. The main event.
And never again after this. That was the stipulation.
Steel cage match. Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer versus the Wildfire Tommy Rich. Paul Ellering is Buzz Sawyer's manager. He's in a shark cage suspended high in the air.
And this is Paul Ellering still in his regular, or still close to his days as a regular professional wrestler. He's wearing his wrestler gear. He's in great shape. He's kind of a poor man's Jesse Ventura character-wise, or a superstar Billy Graham. That's sort of the look.
So let's talk about this cage a little bit. It's the NWA style chain link fence. However,
let's do a fashion report on this cage because it is something.
So it's the NWA style chain link fence. However, this cage has a roof on it, which is incredibly rare. So it's got some poles across the top, and then this
is a rudimentary top to this steel cage. It is
just chain link laid across the top, basically,
with some poles just to make sure, like when guys bounce off the ropes, it doesn't fall into the ring. But the thing about it is the fact that it looks so haphazardly put together makes it that much more terrifying and seem like it just portends even more violence. I love the look of this.
Absolutely. And it was low. It was a low cage roof. So you're talking maybe 10 feet. So no, there could be no top rope moves here because of how low that roof was. And interestingly enough, no referee.
Yeah,
Also,
no referee inside the ring. The ring announcer tells us that this is the Battle of Atlanta. It is the very last time these two people will ever meet in the ring. And I immediately I flash back to some after I watched this match. You sent me a link to a couple promos on YouTube of Buzz Sawyer leading like the day before this match. And my God, the fresh, you can't even call them scars, the fresh cuts on his forehead. We kind of forget that everyone, particularly in the NWA back then, people, their foreheads were like roadmaps. We're not just talking about Abdul the Butcher, but you look at Dusty Rhodes or a Buzz Sawyer or even a Ric Flair. It is horrifying. Like we got so desensitized to it back in that time period. I know I was as a kid who grew up on this style of wrestling. And you look back at it now and it's just like, my God, these guys legit mutilated themselves, for, to get some blood here in these matches. It was crazy.
So with no referee, I'm like, okay, well, this is like, this must be like a last man standing match then, like where someone loses if they can't answer the 10 count. And we will hear the ring announcer administering the 10 count during the match.
Well, that's fine. I think that's great. The weirder thing for me by far is that, so you have no referee in the ring. There's no referee around the ring that is making counts that we can see. A man will go for a cover multiple times in this match, and then we will hear the ring announcer count 1, 2, and then the wrestler who is pinned has to guess when the ring announcer is going to say 3 and get his shoulder up before then. Like it is, if we take this to be a legitimate sport, I am in the ring and I am being pinned, I am doing everything within my power to get my shoulder up the second I hear 2. Because you have no idea when 3 is coming. I was
really like taken aback when I heard the ring announcer counting when I saw a guy go for a pin. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? And then I hear the ring announcer go 1, 2, and I'm like, what? You can.
It seemed like something out of the old THQ video games, like the old like N64 games, where you'd hear that, and I'm like, but no, like how do they? Oh, I got so anxiety weird every time it got to 2 for these men having to make sure they kicked out before 3.
Tommy Rich with an elbow. Sawyer, he's leaning against the cage. Rich tries another elbow, misses, elbows the cage.
Well, let's hold on. Before we do this, let's describe visually these two men for people who have never seen them, or especially at this time. We can go back to ECW Living Dangerously 1998 when we reviewed that
does not
show.
Describe either of these guys.
Well, Tommy Rich, the Big Don, was managing the FBI in the opener, and he's a younger version, but he has the exact same haircut, that like blonde feathered haircut that makes him look like a poor man's Ric Flair. Not particularly great shape, but not in terrible shape. Just, looks like a wrestler. Buzz Sawyer. We talked about this a little bit before we went on the air, before we hit record on this podcast. Buzz Sawyer was always a terrifying character. We both remember him from 1989 NWA JTEX Corporation. He was terrifying then, but you talked about how he seemed like an old man then. As I'm sure you'll tell the listeners, he was not as old as he seemed then.
No, he was only like 30 in 89. Absolutely nuts.
Here he is like in his early 20s. He is just a coiled ball of just electricity and frenetic energy. He's bald. He's short, but he's super muscular. No knee pads. He jumps off the screen even here in like very low fidelity single camera shot. He's the Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer, and when you see him, you feel as though there's danger lurking. He is just that type of guy.
Yeah, Sawyer goes to work on the arm, and Sawyer sends Rich face first into the cage, biting the forehead, and Tommy Rich is busted open. And like you mentioned, so he's bleeding, and it's already getting into the white blonde hair that you described. But Tommy Rich is also wearing white trunks as well, so just blood all over everything. It was quite a visual.
Well, it's one of those crime scene sort of cuts where he's, as you said, there's blood in the hair, there's blood on the trunks, and then there's like huge splatters of blood on his chest. Like it's again, the biggest difference between WWF, blue bar steel cage matches and these NWA fence steel cage matches is that, the idea was that you were going to bleed a lot. And that was the case here right away in this decisive battle.
Tommy Rich hits a low blow, but Sawyer's right back on the attack, rubbing Rich's face against the cage. Rich fires up, rams Sawyer into the cage. He's bleeding now, too. Tommy Rich with a pile driver on Sawyer. This pile driver, holy cow, is it terrifying.
Yeah. Yes. And this is where we get the ref counting over the mic for the 10 count.
They trade shots back and forth. Sawyer with a pile driver of his own. He plants Rich, who does the cool thing where he holds the headstand after the impact for a second. Sawyer continues the beating, and Rich's hair is now bright pink at this point, while his face is the proverbial crimson mask.
Yeah, we have a lot of what's going on here. Once the cut is opened up, you said after that pile driver, the great sell by Tommy Rich, we have Buzz standing over Tommy Rich, punching him, biting him to open up the cut even more. We get a great slow pan back so we can see Paul Ellering suspended over the cage. We then slowly zoom back to the ring. Buzz Sawyer punching at Tommy Rich's forehead again. Another very aggressive throw into the cage. And at this point, even on the hard cam, you can see how very, very bloody both men are. Buzz Sawyer is bleeding like a pig here. He is as bad as the cut or cuts are on Tommy Rich. Buzz Sawyer's is even worse. He is, again, we talk about his face, his neck, his chest, and everything you talked about with what you would see in the magazines talking about this match is evident here, and you can understand why. Seeing it in those magazines, because it wasn't even a thing where it was just in 1983. I remember when I first started getting wrestling magazines in the late 80s, I vividly recall one of them, whether it was PWI or Inside Wrestling or The Wrestler, one of them did like a retrospective on this match and showed these pictures. Well. Yeah. Because that was my introduction to this whole thing, and just thinking, wow, like there were two things in the magazines that stuck with me. Those pictures, and as we've talked about on this podcast before, even though it wasn't a show we've reviewed, when Kevin Sullivan carved up Wing Kanemaru's arm in Smoky Mountain. Those sorts of things, those angles were as much done for the magazines as they were for TV. And this, you could see how this stuck in a lot of people's minds when they saw still images.
Backbreaker by Sawyer, who goes for a cover. The ring announcer counts 1, 2, and Rich kicks out. So that's where I learned that you can pin the guy too, is at that moment.
Yeah.
So new wrestling promotion idea, no referees. The ring announcer officiates from a distance. This solves a lot of the wrestling incompetent ref problems. We should
yes, bring it on. You can't, think how much harder you'd have to work as a heel to have a ref bump happen. You've got to go outside and take out the ring announcer.
So Rich and Sawyer are on their knees, and they're trading shots back and forth.
And the blood is literally flying through the air as they're fighting on their knees. And that's everything you want out of a match that's supposed to be the culmination of a years-long feud where they will almost never have another match again. Yeah.
Almost 2 years long. And you could, this is the point where they're showing the exhaustion. They're showing the fatigue of the blood loss. And they're just fueled only on hate, and they're trading these shots back and forth.
That's the only thing that's driving them is their hatred of the man they're in the ring with.
Tommy Rich to the second turnbuckle. He can't go to the top like I mentioned earlier because of that roof. He misses a punch as Sawyer rolls out of the way.
Yeah, he goes for that second rope fist drop, basically a Jerry Lawler style fist drop.
Rich is leaning against the ropes, and at this point Sawyer, with a running start as fast as he can, tries to hit like a big stinger splash.
Like a big flying crossbody, total reckless abandon, like you said, full speed with Rich up against the ropes, which is obviously up against the cage.
And Rich moves out of the way. Sawyer goes flying at full speed, reckless abandon into the cage and just crashes hard.
So great. Again, one of those things I'm surprised we don't see happen in cage matches more often, maybe because there aren't many men as crazy as Buzz Sawyer to do this. But this would go on my Mount Rushmore of spots we've seen in matches we've reviewed on this podcast. I just loved this.
That was so cool. He gets rammed into three sides of the cage. Rich can only get a 2 count. Sawyer's head is going off the cage again.
Going off the cage, specifically going off the poles.
He keeps
throwing them from side to side into the poles, and he is just at this point. I write down like this is not as dynamic as people would want in 2020, but it was bloody and violent and a prototype for everything that the War Games would become in the next few years.
And he's down flat on his back. Rich uses the ring canvas to pull himself as he crawls over to try to cover. And that's when the announcer calls 1, 2, and 3. Your winner, Wildfire, Tommy Rich. I loved watching him use the canvas to just pull himself over. That was so cool. And everyone could see it. We could see it from the faraway hard camera shot. And
yeah.
it was a great story, a great finish, and the end of this feud. The good guy wrestlers get into the ring and all help roll Tommy Rich out.
Well, as the ring announcer, apparently the fans had rushed the cage because at this point the ring announcer yells, "Ladies and gentlemen,
take your seats.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand back. Please take your seats. Please stand back."
And Paul Ellering is lowered down. He runs into the cage to check on Sawyer, who is still down.
Oh my God, does Buzz Sawyer need to be checked on? He is. We talk a lot. There's the Muda scale, going back to that legendary match the Great Muda had with Hiroshi Hase in Japan and New Japan Pro Wrestling, where there's a cut, there's blood, and it's a total gusher, and that's kind of the gold standard, or I guess the red standard for bleeding in pro wrestling. Buzz might be even worse than that. Here he is just a mess. He's doing such a great job of and I'm sure part of it is just him being a great professional wrestler. He's not only is he bleeding, but it's like the amount of blood loss makes it almost impossible for him to move as they're trying to get him up and out of the ring. It was the thing about this match that, like I said, it wasn't as dynamic as, a War Games match that you'd see nowadays, or, big cage matches or feud ending things, but it had it felt like a fight. It felt like pure unadulterated hatred, and it had everything that you need to slip into buying into what you're seeing. Like, as I was watching this, what it really felt like to me was the prototype for that War Games 1992 match from Wrestle War that we've reviewed on this podcast, and that I talk about as in my opinion, maybe the greatest American pro wrestling match of all time. Like, this had obviously less guys and not as much crazy fast-paced stuff, but it had that same feeling.
We got a great shot here where Sawyer's sitting up and his face is covered in blood, like you mentioned. And this is like a pose for all the magazines. Like, you could see the people taking the photos, and this is a shot that would be in the magazines of a beaten, bloodied Buzz Sawyer post-match here. And it takes forever to get him out of the ring.
Which I don't mind at all, because it completely works with what we just saw. And again, you say realism or believability in the context of the completely unreal and unbelievable world of pro wrestling. But given the if I can use the word universe that we're operating in, like, this feels real and feels scary and serious.
Ole Anderson hits the ring and immediately attacks Paul Ellering.
Ole in street clothes. He's got ripped up jeans. He's got a very late 70s style polo on. And yeah, he is Ole Anderson, mega baby face here, booking the territory.
Yeah, and he's Ellering's in his wrestling gear while Ole's in his street clothes. And we're going to get a cage match here in the same cage, Ellering versus Ole, because Tommy Rich won. Ole gets this match. And Ole just destroyed him, ramming him into all sides of the cage. Ole has him down, punching him in the face.
Lots of Ole punches, which are cool because he throws great punches.
Great.
I love how at one point, he body slams Ellering, punches him over and over. Then at one point, Ellering is down, trying to get up, and Ole goes down to his knees just so he can get on Ellering's level and punch him some more. I don't know why, but I love that.
Ole with a headbutt that looked brutal, like he was trying to bust Ellering open hard way with that headbutt.
Yes, that was like a Tomohiro Ishii headbutt It was a little weird to see from Ole Anderson in 1983.
Yeah, Ole's jeans ended up getting just torn down the leg completely. Ole's rubbing Ellering's face in the cage. Ellering's now busted open. He's bleeding. We get a shot of the empty seats in the front row as my favorite old ladies had left the building.
To beat the traffic.
Well, the camera then pans out, and no, wait. With that pan out a little more, the old ladies are still there. They are the best. They did not leave after the main event. And this was an absolute one-sided destruction. You know, like the kind Pez Whatley and Jimmy Valiant put on the Road Warriors.
Like you'd expect.
Just like you'd expect.
The one thing I did love about this match is, well, first we have Ellering miss a terrible leg drop, and then we get the finish, which is like them time traveling to Pride with a Don Fry Yoshihiro Takayama dueling punch spot. That was amazing. That Ole Anderson ends with a vicious headbutt for the 3 count.
Yeah, as soon as Ole hits that headbutt, gets a 3 count, we then immediately
have a referee in the ring for this one, by the way.
We do.
Scrappy's in there for this one.
And we get over the loudspeaker, "Thank you for coming, everyone," and that's the announcement, and then they announce the next show, and you see people filing out of the building, and then Jake the Snake Roberts hits the ring.
So awesome. Such a great classic way of doing this. No one thinks it's coming. Like you said, you do the customary thing that ends every show where you thank the people for coming, tell them when the next show is so they know to buy their tickets.
House lights are up. Yep.
House lights are up. And then here comes Jake the Snake Roberts wearing a Pro Wrestling Illustrated t-shirt, which I love. But he comes down, and Jake and Eller, they just beat the hell out of Ole Anderson. Jake whips him with his belt.
He's got his belt off. He's choking Ole with the belt. He's beating him. He's whipping him, and he's getting revenge for earlier's miscarriage of justice, where he didn't get the title for the awesome beatdown that he put on. And so he begins whipping Ole with that belt while Ellering's holding him down. The referee gets a lash to the face because he gets too close to the action. Tons of people are surrounding the ring. It looks and feels completely chaotic.
Oh, absolutely. It feels dangerous. It feels as though there could be,
these are
not
like
to
fans.
overdo it.
There's like a bunch of like fans around this cage. Like it's nuts.
It feels like there could be a riot, like not overstating it. It feels like if this went on for a little bit longer, like one more major thing happened, we could have fans in the ring. It was great. At this point, I'm reaching into my wallet, trying to figure out how and what I need to do to buy my ticket for the November show at the Omni. This was just perfect pro wrestling at the end here.
It was so great. There's tons of people tending to Ole in the ring as the show goes off the air. And absolutely a super fun show to watch. I'm glad that this tape was unearthed, that it existed, and we got to review it here. Best match for you has to, for me, it has to be the main event cage match. That Sawyer Tommy Rich was exactly the fight that it was built up to be. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm going with the last battle of Atlanta, Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer and Wildfire Tommy Rich. As you said, there's a lot of build up to actually seeing this. It lived up to it. I will say that it was hard for me to not say the Jake Roberts match as well, just because it was such a masterclass by Jake.
It might have been my favorite match if I wasn't so confused by the
the finish
by the finish. So I think that's the only thing that wouldn't have it also be the best match for me as well. So
there were 2 stars or two great things on this show: the last battle of Atlanta and everything Jake Roberts did.
100%. What's your least favorite? Oh, and one of the best things on the show were the greatest wrestling fans I've ever seen. Those old women in the front row. They made the show for me. I loved them. Love those ladies. Worst thing on the show for you? Was it a match? Which match was it? What do you think?
This is tough because there's there's the Pez Watley, Jimmy Valiant beatdown of the Road Warriors. But it was almost so weird that I don't understand it. And it was so weird that it's memorable. And we've seen so many things on these shows that we've reviewed that just aren't memorable, like everything in the AWA.
Correct.
So I
will
can't
mention
say
this. We'll mention that beating on many shows to come for sure.
Yes, exactly. It was memorable. So it did its job, very oddly, but it did its job to some extent. Pat Rose versus Bruno San Martino Jr. was just boring AWA 1987 style pro wrestling. So I am going to go with that.
Yeah, no, that's it. You are correct. I think that's the only thing we can go with there. And with that, we're gonna wrap it up. Final thoughts here before we call it a podcast.
Oh, I love this. Again, not the technically best pro wrestling show you've ever seen. If you're looking for a lot of high flying or more modern stuff, this may be a bit difficult to sink your teeth into, but I would absolutely recommend people go back and watch this because, for one, it was the picture perfect way of how to blow off a years-long blood feud. And you just get to see so many great little things. Like we said, everything Jake Roberts did, but even things like guys like Brett Wayne, who are kind of forgotten to the sands of time. And he did some great things here as a very sympathetic babyface. So yeah, definitely worth watching. And I feel like a rebound from some of the stuff we've watched in recent weeks.
A make good from the randomizer.
Yeah,
finally.
The randomizer. it has a heart. As random as it is, I think part of it is that the randomizer, it does want to keep existing.
Yes.
And so survival will make you do things. And it's the need to survive, I'm assuming, is what caused it to spit out this show for us to watch.
If you like what we do here and you want to support the show, make sure you support with the show by following us on Twitter and Instagram at WrestleAtRandom, Facebook.com/WrestlingAtRandom as well. You can listen to the entire back catalog of this podcast on our website, WrestlingAtRandom.com. That also has all the links to subscribe. So make sure you subscribe, rate, review. That helps others find our show. Make sure you tell your wrestling fan friends about us. Tell your friends who used to be wrestling fans to, hey, take a look through these archives. Take a trip down memory lane with us. We've got a pretty good sized back catalog now, so a lot of good stuff there, a lot of fun trips.
And I've talked about it several podcasts ago, but we're firmly in the territory now where you can go on a complete bender, not sleep for at least 1, maybe 2 days, and just do nothing but listen to our show. And I would absolutely recommend doing that.
And we run the randomizer, and every single Thursday we post on social media what event that week's episode will cover. So again, make sure you're following us on all of those platforms, and then every Sunday night an episode will drop for you. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us, Adam.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. A good time as always.
Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.